How to Rock Like Best-Selling Author Ted Decker. This episode, a conversation with brand manager Kevin Kaiser.
It really is your own responsibility to get the word out about your book. Publishers are not in the business of building audiences.
I'm Chris Well, and this is DIY Author. You're an author. Maybe you're taking the traditional route. Maybe you've chosen an independent path. Or maybe you want the best of both worlds. Wherever you want to go as a writer, DIY Author is here to help you on your journey with advice, encouragement, and practical tips. Because do it yourself doesn't have to mean do it alone. Welcome to DIY Author. I'm your host, Chris Well. Our guest this episode is Kevin Kaiser. In his role as a senior brand manager at entertainment agency Creative Trust, he worked with multiple New York Times best-selling authors, as well as advising big publishers on how to engage with audiences. Recently, he co-founded the independent imprint Outlaw Studios with best-selling author Ted Decker. Coming up, we discuss some of the strategies that helped Ted Decker become a best-selling author, the most underrated tools available to authors today, and the number one priority to an author trying to build a career. But first, we are launching a brand new segment on the show titled Author Tips. This is where you and other authors have the opportunity to send us practical tips and even words of encouragement to share on the podcast. This week's tip comes to us from women's fiction writer Krista Bannister. You can find her online at KristaBannister.com. Take it away, Krista.
Hi there, this is Krista Bannister. I'm a movie critic and a women's fiction author, and my tip is this. Unlike the movies where someone has this huge burst of inspiration and writes pages and pages and pages of prose and then is finished in like a couple days flat. Well, unfortunately, that's nothing like real life. You don't need this huge burst of inspiration. You just need to be diligent and write a little something every day. A blog post, a tweet, a few paragraphs, anything will get you closer to your goal of being a professional writer. So write a little every day. You'll be happy you did.
Thank you, Krista. Once again, you can find her online at KristaBannister.com. If you have something that you would like to share, maybe a quick tip to help me be a better writer, or to make it easier to edit, or a new way to look at marketing, then by all means, please pass it along. The best way to get in touch is to go to our website, DIYauthor.com/tips. That's TIPS. Or you can just go to DIYauthor.com and look for the orange sidebar. If your computer has a microphone, then you could just hit record and talk right into your computer. It's easy. I'm very excited about the opportunity to bring more authors onto the show, and I hope that you'll consider being a part of it. And now my interview with brand manager Kevin Kaiser. Hello, I'm talking now with Kevin Kaiser, who has worked in a variety of capacities, management capacities, brand management capacities with a variety of best-selling authors. And rather than me try to explain all of the various sundry things you do, I don't know, sundry a bad word. Anyway, Kevin, hello, Kevin, welcome. And why don't you tell us what you do?
Hey, Chris. Well, some days I'm not even sure what I do. So I'll give you a 30,000-foot view. Well, I got started in the brand management world working with Creative Trust. Now, Creative Trust is an entertainment agency based in Nashville, Tennessee. And they're involved in both music and in the book business. So all of the things that I had my hands in were in the book side. And really, as a senior brand manager, my role was to advise a roster of New York Times bestselling authors on how to build up their audiences. And then I would also advise their publishers, because we're in this world now where it's really falling to the authors and in music, to musicians as well, to build up their own audiences for the publishers. Publishers just aren't in the business of building audiences or building author brands. And so over the past 5 years, my role with the publishers has gotten deeper and deeper, often to the point where we are doing all of the grassroots marketing on behalf of the publisher. So there's that aspect of my life. And then because I'm also an artist, I do a lot of production work. So co-development, co-creation of really fun projects. So books, videos, live events, You name it, I've probably had my hand in it. Comic books. I'm one of those weird hybrid people.
Now, at this point, you are working most closely with best-selling thriller author Ted Decker, and you mentioned that you are the co-founder of Outlaw Studios.
Uh-huh.
What is that?
Okay, so Outlaw Studios is this idea that Ted and I had a few years ago, knowing that publishing was going the direction, book publishing was going the direction of music, that we would need to find ways to engage his audience with new kinds of stories. So there's front list, obviously this is the new stuff that comes out, which eventually becomes backlist. But we had this idea called side list. We wanted to do some independently published stuff just to experiment, so serialized fiction, ebooks, all of this kind of stuff, because he's got a really active audience. And really the only way to do that was to do it outside of the publisher's realm and create our own little mad scientist laboratory. And that's what Outlaw Studios is. So it's like the shed in the back corner of the backyard that has the sign, no girls allowed. So that's what Outlaw Studios is.
Have you been with Ted since the beginning, or how long have you been working with Ted overall?
Let's see, it's been about 8 years. I met him. We both lived in Colorado at the same time. Had some common friends, and I was actually in the investment business at the time. I was a director of a wealth management company, and was getting up early in the morning to write books because I didn't really want to be an investment guy all my life. And so one day, this guy, a CPA, refers this guy to us. He comes in, and it was Ted. It was Ted and his wife, and it was the most bizarre meeting I've ever had, but it was the most interesting meeting I've ever had, and we just became friends, mostly because he was a businessman before he became a writer, and we just clicked. I was trying to break into that world. So, a few years later, I moved to Nashville and became his manager. I think that was about 8 years ago. I think we're coming up on 8 years. So it's been a while. But I think he got started 15 years ago, 18 years ago, something like that.
Okay. Now, when you mentioned earlier that you have worked in a lot of different kinds of media and a lot of different kinds of storytelling, several, if not all of those, have been connected to Ted's storytelling, both content creation but also promoting content. What are some of the strategies that either you've seen from your vantage point or that you participated in that helped Ted become a best-selling author?
Wow. That's the $1 million question. So I would say, first of all, marketing and finding audience, it's all a really messy business, because there's this notion that, if you try something, there's this notion that there's a template, that if something works one time, it'll work again. And it's just simply not the case. There's a really interesting Harvard Business Review article, and I can't remember the author who wrote it, but she penned a book called Blockbuster, and she talks about the things that are required in order to have a massive hit. She focuses primarily on books, but she debunks this notion that one size fits all, that there are commonalities between bestsellers. There really aren't, other than there was somebody with a loud mouth who was willing to talk to their audience about it. Someone bigger than the author, someone bigger than the movie. And it was just this cascade of events and cascade of conversations that made it popular. I mean, because that's really what we're talking about, is what makes stuff popular. And I think the first thing you have to do is, you can't try and figure out what the market wants. I think you just have to create what you really like. And then it's just really hard work to try and connect connect your art with people that resonate with the same things that you like, you know, but just one person at a time. And I find from campaign to campaign, book to book, our strategies change drastically. It's, you know, because we try things and we fail a lot. And our mantra is fail early and fail cheaply. And if you're going to fail, at least try and fail with other people's money, which is, you know, that's one of the things about working with a publisher is they are, you know, they're managing risk. They are playing the role of a venture capitalist in some ways because nobody really knows what's going to work. You just, you know, I'll never forget a conversation I overheard with one of the CEOs at one of the Big Six, or what used to be the Big Six, and he summed up how publishers work. He said, you know, I've placed my bets. We'll see which horses come in this year. And that's really how they look at the marketing side of the business. We'll just see what works. And if it doesn't, try something else.
To continue on this line about the multiple media, one of the things that's really interesting to me is that if a lot of authors think of content in a single way, whether that's making stories a single way or even promoting things in a particular specific narrow way. And as you've said, you know, you've done different things. There have been comics, there are live events, there are, you know, you make book trailers, you do all different kinds of things. What are the ones that you felt like, okay, these are the things that worked, and which ones are the ones that you feel like could still work, they just haven't really paid off yet?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see, what's worked? Well, you know, for Ted, because I've spent most of my time in that world, in his world, what seems to connect really well with his audience is when we approach everything as if Ted himself is the content. And I've always believed this about every artist, you know, because you put out the work, you create this work, whether it's a book or a song, and you cast it out into the world. But really, the only reason why people listen to your song or read your book or come to your event is because of you. You know, there's something about you, whether it's the way you see the world, the way you are in the world, that attracts those people. And so for Ted, we've figured out, well, we just need to give him unvarnished to his audience. And, you know, whether that's through Facebook, through email, we've done live events where, you know, just this last fall, we did a 1 month, 20 city tour. And it wasn't meant to be a book signing tour. It wasn't really meant to do any of the conventional things that you would think a tour would do. It was really just to connect with his fans, his hardcore fans. And I think, honestly, that's some of the best money that we've ever spent. That's some of the best time we've ever spent, because you forget that the people that are reading your books or listening to your music are actual people. You know, because everything is pixels these days. You know, we all live online, and we tend to forget that, oh, wow, well, these are actual people. And if you approach everything you do with that in mind, it seems that works better. That's a better strategy than, you know, looking at people as statistics, or, you know, or just as page views and, you know, unique visitors. Yeah, but that's really hard work. I mean, that's, you know, reaching one person at a time, 10 people at a time, 100 people at a time. Another thing that's really worked out well for us is really taking advantage of the availability of technology. So over the past couple of years, we've experimented with doing serialized fiction and making things available in new ways so that we can introduce it to people, you know, new readers and existing readers, in making it very easy for them to consume it. I mean, we did this with Eyes Wide Open. It was a 400-page novel that was chopped up into episodes. We gave the first one away, and the first one was downloaded about 600,000 times. And then the second one, not as many times, but it's still, you know, it still was an experiment, and it was one that a publisher wasn't willing to take because there's risk. so we did it ourselves, and that worked out pretty well.
When something works, are you able to parse it from, it's the thing that worked versus, well, it worked because it's Ted or because Ted has a huge readership?
Mm-hmm. Well,
and I guess from his vantage point, does it matter to tell the difference?
Well, I think it matters. I think it's what's hard in this whole equation is how do you define success, and really how we define success is primarily as books sold. So that's the trickiest part, though, because when you put up an ad, for instance, how do you know that somebody who saw that ad went and bought the book because they saw that ad? This is the continual challenge of doing advertising in our world. So one of the key challenges is how do we tie actual outcomes to what we're doing? So like we had this idea a couple of years ago. There was a book that came out called The Priest Graveyard, and the publisher was spending a lot of money, getting advertising out, putting an ad in USA Today, did ads on New York City subway, and I asked them, well, where are we sending people? What are we going to do? How are we going to know that those ads actually worked? So I don't know. It still blows my mind that this was available, but we snagged the URL getthisbook.com. And the whole idea was, just make it really sticky, something easy that people can remember when they get off the subway. Because that was the idea was, well, people are going to see it. They're going to get off the subway. They're going to forget it by the time they get to street level, because they're not going to remember, well, Decker, was it CK or was it KK? What was the name of the book? I don't remember. And then they forget it. But you can remember getthisbook.com. So we were able to track click-throughs to the retailers with that. But I mean, that's how we determine if something was successful or not. It's just like everybody else. It's, did we sell books from it? Did we add anybody to our community through it? And if the answer to that is yes, then, I guess it's successful.
Now, if we turn our attention to those of us authors who are not Ted Decker, and we're still trying to find our way, trying to figure out how to build a career. Let's try to apply some of what you've learned to just regular Joe authors. What would you consider the number one priority to an author right now?
Well, I think the number one thing is to become a creation machine. The first thing you have to do is if you're a writer, you need to write. And you need to write a lot. And I've looked at lots and lots of different authors. I know lots of authors. You're one of them, Chris. Where you can't just.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome. And for those of you who have not read Chris' stuff, you have to read it. So.
Wow.
Just go with that, man. Just go with it. So, but you have to. There's this idea of what, if I build it, they will come, because I'll just put it on the internet and people will come. No, that's not true. You need to write a book, and then you need to write another one, and then another one, and then another one. Because if you look at all of these authors that have done really well, they're first of all prolific, and it usually takes them quite a while before anything sticks. I mean, since we're using Ted as an example, he wrote 5 books before he got his first deal. And Dean Koontz didn't. I'd heard Dean Koontz didn't hit the New York Times list until his 30th book or 35th book or something like that. You have to create. You have to be patient. You have to do the work. Now, after you've done the work, then what? Well, what you need to do is start finding other artists, other writers that are a couple levels above you. And, don't be gurmy. Don't approach them and solely with the purpose of snagging an endorsement or, getting something from them. Just get involved in the author community, because I'll tell you that everything happens on the level of relationships. Always. That's how these authors get endorsements from each other. I mean, they get it primarily from things like Thriller Fest. So, so for people who are thriller writers listening to this, you need to get involved in International Thriller Writers. You need to go to Thriller Fest or find a way somehow. I know it's expensive, but find a way and just start reaching out and become part of the larger writer community. Now, will that guarantee you success? No, but you will actually be in the mix, and you have to be in the mix in order for stuff to happen. Because you'll just be bumping up against people. So get involved in the larger community, and then start building your own. And that's just a matter of doing it one person at a time, putting out content, even if it starts out with just 10 people. Treat those 10 people as if they're 10,000 people. Treat them as if they are the best fans that you've ever had, because they are. They may be the only fans you have at the moment. And treat them as people and serve them and give them more than you're asking of them. I think if you focus on those things, that opportunities will be presented to you, and you just step through those doors.
I'm wondering now to those authors, because as we also look at the model that you and the authors you've worked with have shown, you work with a lot of different kinds of digital tools. You've embraced digital tools, digital media, video, sound, comics. I think at some point you were talking about or working with games, maybe.
Yeah, that didn't get very far though. Turns out games are pretty expensive.
Okay, so you wouldn't recommend that for like an unpublished author?
Well, I think if you can, I think if it makes sense and you want to do it, I say go for it. We've tried to figure out how it fits into Ted's world and to other authors' worlds, but we just haven't found it a good fit yet. That doesn't mean it's not there. We just haven't found it for those particular people that we're working with. But I think you need to do the things that really interest you. If you're a comic book person, yeah, go do comic books. If you're not a comic book person, that's going to come through. It's just going to come through. We're far enough into this age of marketing where people can sniff out if this is really what you're about or not. So I think above all, you need to tell the story that you want to tell, and just see the different media as, hey, this is just a different way for me to tell this story.
What do you think are the most underrated tools that are available to authors?
Oh, man, that's a really good question. If we're talking about the internet, it seems like things are gravitating more and more toward a visual-based platform. So you've got Instagram. If you look at, just take a look at what's in your Facebook news feed or on Twitter. It's a lot of images. Now, how authors use that to tell stories, we're trying to figure that out too. So I think at the moment that's a little, maybe not underrated, but it's underused. I don't think we really cracked the code on how to use that. I think that's one. I think also we're in a time when people are looking for real connection with people. So I have lots of friends that have Facebook fatigue. They have Twitter fatigue. That interacting with pixels and having all of the surfacey stuff of relationship without any of the substance below it is becoming tiresome for a lot of people. So, I see more authors reaching out individually to readers, doing meetups in their cities, or, simple things like, not just sending out e-newsletters, but actually typing up actual letters, hand-signed or handwritten notes, and send them to people, which nobody ever does anymore. So I think there's some, old school things that I think are going to come back, and people are going to do more and more of them, because people really do want to be part of a community, a real community. So, I mean, we're experimenting with some of those things, and I think it really works, because like I said, everything comes down to relationship.
And wrapping up, you are also an author yourself.
I am.
What are the lessons? What are the things you've learned in management and brand management that you're thinking, okay, I got to remember this for note to self. Make sure I do this when my book is coming out.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the first thing is you have to realize that it really is your own responsibility to get the word out about your book. Publishers are not in the business of building audiences, really. Their primary client, their audience, is the person at Barnes & Noble who buys the book and puts it on the shelf, the employee of Barnes & Noble. So publishers are thinking more and more about the consumer as the end user, but as the author, you need to be thinking about that every single day and starting now to build up that platform and reaching out. So I mean, that's the first thing on the marketing side. But I think more importantly is you have to do the work. I mean, you definitely have to do the work and just keep putting stuff out, experiment, try different things, put your story out in as many different ways as possible. And it's amazing how quickly we forget that, just to do it. Because it's hard to be both creative, like create the stuff, and then to go out and sell it. I mean, they're two different mindsets. But that's the challenge of being an author these days, right?
That's absolutely correct. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
This has been DIY Author. Please visit us online at DIYauthor.com and be sure to sign up for our email newsletter. If you enjoyed this program, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, do it yourself doesn't have to mean do it alone.